Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, Vice President of Product Strategy here at Zimperium. I'd like to welcome you to another webinar. I actually am excited about this one. This is a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, so I'm looking forward to diving in. As people are starting to continue to join, some of the standard upfront perfunctory comments, I always like to say, because my mom is an English teacher. We're going to try and keep it 20-25 minutes worth of content. If you have any questions, I will field those at the end. If you don't, we will give you time back. We don't like to make up questions. Please feel free to follow us on social media. Our social media follow is great to continue to stay up to date on all things mobile security. There will be an archived version of this up within a day or so. And if anybody's interested, we can get you copies of the slides as well. So with that, we are going to dive into a topic that is becoming very, very, very important. Matter of fact, I was having a conversation the other day. There's many, many things that are driving people to secure their mobile endpoints and are driving the budgets within enterprises throughout the world. And one of the punchlines is Zimperium is the enterprise leader in mobile threat defense. We've got the most enterprise capable solution, the one that operates on multiple clouds. I mean, all these different things that makes us the enterprise leader. So we've got perspective around enterprises around the world. And by enterprise, I mean all size businesses. I'm using it as a catchphrase, and also government agencies. So to be very clear, and part of the reason I kind of mentioned that is that it's fascinating to me. There's two major things right now that are driving a lot of people to pay attention to mobile security at an even heightened level. Mobile phishing is one, BYOD is the other. And it's amazing to me how many plans and programs and RFPs and everything we're seeing, even from what you would expect not to be a BYOD rich environment, government agencies and things on those lines. And frankly, I personally think, this is JT's opinion, it is not sanctioned Zimperium, it's my own personal opinion. I think the work that Microsoft is doing is a huge part of that. So we're going to dive into what they're doing and how mobile threat defense from Zimperium works together as we dive into this. So with that, let's just kind of step into this. Clearly, mobile initiatives are happening across the board today, and they're critical for businesses. You know, when we first start thinking about these things, before we dive into security issues or privacy issues or risks or threats or any of that, you always have to kind of start off by saying, okay, well, who cares, right? And the bottom line is there was a company here in the States, BASF, that had commercials for years and years and years, and they said, we don't make the products, we make the products better, right? We don't make these initiatives, we just secure them. Because you've got all these incredible initiatives. For instance, 60% of endpoints that are accessing the enterprise today, assets are, you know, the data that's actually sitting on those devices, or accessing the networks that they're getting access to. And it could be everything from email to shared drives to whatever the case may be. 60% of these endpoints are mobile. And that's a combination of corporate owned and BYOD, but the curve is amazing towards BYOD right now. Like I was saying, across every industry and every size, the BYOD thing is a train that has definitely left the proverbial station. And then, of course, there's also mobile apps being key drivers, but obviously not the primary focus of today. The primary focus of today is on the BYOD side, so devices that are owned by the employees. So these initiatives are absolutely critical for enterprises today, but they expose those assets and access to a brand new set of risks, right? There's malicious apps, there's mobile phishing, which I just mentioned, there's network attacks, device attacks. Now, when we look at these risks, we have to kind of make sure that we look at them with the guise of three primary laws of cybersecurity that have been here for quite some time. First one is targeted attacks. We are here to protect the enterprise, right? Our job is to eradicate any threats that go after the enterprise from a mobile perspective. That's what we do. So targeted attacks, if somebody's going after XYZ company, quite often it's not going to be attacks that are widely known, widely spread, et cetera. So, and that's been the same for as long as there's been attacks against enterprises outside of when viruses first started, right? Second thing, land and expand. The bad guys are always looking for the weakest link in, and then they're going to expand. A few years ago, it was point of sale terminals. Right now, 60% of the endpoints that are accessing the enterprise are in the hands of users as the admin. That is a huge difference with mobile. Spending 80% of the time outside of their protected corporate network. In the BYOD scenario, it even adds more to this. They decide what networks are going to connect to, what apps are going to install, what emails are going to click, just what messaging apps they're going to use, etc. So, and then they walk back into the enterprise. So from a land and expand standpoint, mobile endpoints are the easiest way to start to penetrate a network. And then there's persistence. As long as bad guys have been going after the enterprise, or going after, enterprise, they're going after assets, they've wanted to remain persistent on any device they have taken over for as long as possible. If you took over a server, you'd want to stay on that server for as long as possible. Quite often in the traditional endpoints, the servers, laptops, desktops, et cetera, that have totally up-to-date patches, totally up-to-date antivirus signatures, everything, are the ones that have already been compromised, because the bad guys would actually protect themselves against other guys coming on, or against the prying eyes of the security team, by making sure that this little device is pristine. Well, in mobile, because all apps are in containers, the only way you can actually be persistent is to compromise the device. In a traditional endpoint, you could come in with malware and you could go sideways through other apps and be persistent. In mobile, it doesn't work that way. So device attacks are the primary goal. Malicious apps are really not the biggest threat across the board from an enterprise standpoint, from a targeted standpoint. Because if I'm going after XYZ company, I'm not going to drop an app in the app store and pray somebody from XYZ company downloads it. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to put up a fake Wi-Fi network. I'm going to do a man-in-the-middle attack. I'm going to do mobile phishing to deliver an exploit to compromise the device. Much more targeted, much more effective. So we've got these devices. We've got these huge initiatives that are going on, particularly BYOD, because CIOs have employees that want to get access to all these things. They want to be in the business of providing this out, but they need to make sure that they're dealing with the risk side of things as well. Because the end game is to compromise the device, and because network attacks are one of the primary ways of very targeted, very simple, very easy way of doing it, on-device protection is critical. Now, this particular quote from Gartner is talking about one of the main reasons on-device protection is required. And that is because if the bad guy owns the network, if all of your detection is up in the cloud, you're in deep trouble. But there's other reasons, particularly as it pertains to BYOD, that are really important. The most notable of which is privacy, right? If you're sending a whole bunch of data off of a device that an employee owns up into a cloud, some portion of that data is highly likely to be private. So if you do all of your detection on device, and the only information you're sending from the device is forensics associated with the attack itself, and on a group-based policy, you can bring it all the way down to not sending any data off the device, like we're doing with City of New York, for instance, with the NYC Secure app, which the City of New York has offered for free to all citizens and people that work in New York City. That is our entire device doing all entire app doing all detection on device with no data ever leaving the device. Because in that case, you don't want it to be looking like the government is snooping, right? But in a BYOD scenario, I'm going to show you an example of how you can actually change the settings by groups to deal with a balance of security and privacy, because in the reality, that's what we have to do with BYOD. We have to put those two pieces together. How do I protect the enterprise? How do I lower risks? How do I make sure that the privacy part of the user, since it's their device, is definitely maintained? Otherwise, we're pretty much doomed to fail, right? So we have one core engine. I'm just going to blast through this quickly, only because it's going to set up the conversation. Z9 is our engine. It detects the 4 major attack vectors on device, both known and unknown threats. So it's machine learning based detection on device. When it comes to protecting devices itself, because I mentioned there's initiatives around devices and there's the initiatives around apps. When it comes to device protection, our primary product is called Zips. We also happen to provide we happen to be the OEM white label version of some of the major products that are out there that are great. So depending on, depending on who you are and what you're looking for instance, secure mobile AI from Sprint is the same as what I'm about to talk about from a Zip standpoint. But if you're a Sprint customer, you would get it from them. We also power the Mobile Iron threat defense, for instance, and there's a whole raft of others that we provide, but the value proposition is the same. When you're protecting the device, you need to be able to identify the risks. Risks are things that make you inherently more likely to be attacked, or if an attack occurs, more likely for it to succeed. So that's risks. How do I increase my risk side of things? Then there's threat detection, actual attacks against the device. Then you have to actually remediate those threats. How do I actually solve them and get them away? And then how do I provide forensic reporting? And I'm not going to go through every single one of these because it's an eye chart. But here's the basic rough ideas of the device risks, for instance, vulnerabilities. App risks, side-loaded apps. Network risks are unsecured Wi-Fi's or reconnaissance scans that are occurring. Actual threats are the persistence objective of device compromises, the phishing attacks, et cetera. And then when remediate, it depends on the scenario. If you've got an MDM, there's a whole bunch of different things. These are just a couple examples that are on there, right? But there's also some local remediations around networks. And then if you're a Samsung Knox capable device, there's a whole nother raft of things that are very cool that we can do. And then you need to be able to provide all the forensics back. Our principles are, you have to operate at scale, known and unknown. You have to deal with privacy. We're talking BYOD, but it's the same thing with GDPR. It's the same thing with CCPA. You have to be able to balance these things because so often the user is the owner of the device. You need to be able to operate on any cloud. We're the only solution, for instance, major solution that operates on Azure. So when we talk about Microsoft now, we'll pivot into that. And then be able to deal with multiple UEMs simultaneously, which is critical because a lot of our customers might be using a different UEM for corporate, but then are heading towards Microsoft now for BYOD. So with all that as a setup, now let's pivot. Now that you understand, these are the initiatives, these are the threats, here's how Zimperium uniquely deals with those threats. Now we're going to start talking about how do we actually work with Intune, which is a part of the endpoint manager solution from Microsoft, to do some really interesting things for BYOD. So here's our current connections. There's the MDM from a corporate device standpoint, which again, from an Intune standpoint. And then there's BYOD MAM, which is what I'm going to be spending my time really talking about right now. Those come in. Our console is called Z Console. That's what's behind Zips. And that actually, as I said, can operate on Microsoft Azure with no problems whatsoever. We also have an integration directly into Defender ATP, where we provide some great forensic data into Defender ATP, which is the primary part is the EDR threat hunting part of Microsoft. So we add value into that solution, and we have some other announcements that are going to be coming out pretty soon. But for folks that aren't familiar with the Microsoft approach, the BYOD MAM side of things, basically, Microsoft has an SDK. And that SDK, software development kit, can be put into any app that you want that has to do with mobile app management. So in a mobile device management side of things, the mobile device solution, when you go to Apple Play, at the App Store, or you go to Google Play, you have, as a user, when your company says, hey, we're going to use this MDM, it's going to be Intune, for instance, then you get this message that says, your company is installing this and blah, blah, blah. And it's a scary message, especially if it's my own device. Now, this is standard language from Apple, standard language from Google, but it says this app can, have access to your email, access to your contacts. They have the ability to wipe your device. So when it comes to BYOD, MDMs terrify users. So most users will rebel against it. And just be for privacy reasons and privacy concerns. And this is my data. These are my photos. These are my contacts, right? Especially in a BYOD scenario. We see it even with corporate, but especially in a BYOD. So what Microsoft has done, and I mentioned at the very onset, that I'm really bullish on this. I think this is a very, very, very smart strategy from Microsoft. what they basically done is they have this SDK where you can install the SDK inside of an app, right? Of a mobile app. And if you install that SDK inside of a mobile app, in this particular case, what it is you're not now controlling the device. You're just basically saying, I'm going to control my app and the data that my app puts on your device. I'm going to have some control over that. And similar to MDM, when MAM started, the primary use cases and everything were what happens if somebody gets fired? What happens if somebody loses their device, right? How do I make sure my data doesn't leave my app if somebody lost their device? Well, what Microsoft has done, working with Zimperium and some other folks, is we've now integrated mobile threat defense, like I was just describing, active ability to detect the risk posture and the threats on that device with the MAM SDK. So now, instead of if somebody got fired, if somebody lost their device, what do? It's if Zimperium detects that the device has been compromised, or it's on a bad Wi-Fi network, or there's malicious apps, the risk posture has gone up for the device. Now we can decide what are we going to do with the app itself. Now, the thing I think is so really, really smart about this is the following. A, the SDK itself. B, is where they've put the SDK, right? The very first thing that everybody always wants from a BYOD scenario is, give me access to email, right? Give me access to, our share drives. Those are almost always Microsoft products. Huge percentage of time, Outlook, Office 365, SharePoint, all these, they're Microsoft products. So all of the Microsoft solutions already have the SDK. So the very thing that everybody wants to start their BYOD initiative with already has the SDK. Microsoft is also working, and it has a whole list of folks, you can go to their website, of other third-party apps like Adobe products and stuff that have the SDK in it. So everything I'm about to show you in terms of the workflow of how this whole thing works when there's a threat that's being detected works for those. And oh, by the way, if you have internal apps that you've developed, maybe as a way to start these BYOD initiatives, you can drop the SDK in as well. So for instance, we've got a customer that's using part of our app protection solution, and they've got 60 some odd mobile apps, 10 or 15 of which are public facing. The rest are all focused on their employees because their employees didn't want a full MDM. And so what they wanted was, hey, I still need to get access to HR. In this case, well, that was kind of they were doing it themselves. You drop the Microsoft MAM SDK in there and you have the same protections and the same workflows that I'm about to step through. So it's a really, really smart approach. And if you take the on-device privacy-centric protection that Zimperium has, and then you take this incredible approach and platform that Intune MAM has, put the two together, it's really phenomenal. It's a really, really good solution. Just a quote from Brad Anderson over there, talking about collaborating with companies like Zimperium to protect enrolled and BYOD devices. So I just thought I'd put that in there because it's always nice to have a nice quote. So I'm going to visually show you this workflow. And then I've got a little video that will actually show it in terms of like, shorten it down to make it tight. But we'll show you how this whole thing works. Now, one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to corporate owned side of things and mobile threat defense is ordinarily company says, hey, we're going to do this. We need mobile threat defense. We need to make sure we've got active ability to detect risks and threats and then go to remediate it on our devices, right? So they have an MDM, and then within the MDM, they will say, here's the apps that you're supposed to have, and they'll put the Zips app, for instance, into the little marketplace. Then they say, okay, end users, we want you to download this app as a part of your initiative to be able to get access from mobile. But it's up to the user to go install that new app and then keep it active. And we've got ways of defending ourselves and bringing it back, but they have to install it and they have to do, and it's a whole secondary effort that occurs. Another thing that's really sharp about what Intune is doing with the MAM side of things is when a user goes to access that app for the first time, if a company has said, we're going to have mobile threat defense as a part of our initiative for end user BYOD, the user has to go install it. Now, in my opinion, we get fancy sometimes from a security standpoint. Again, this is JT's opinion. This isn't, gospel across the board. And, I think sometimes we get a little too fancy. So we come up with terms, or Gartner comes up with terms like mobile threat defense, or IDC, mobile threat protection. And we have these big words, right? Endpoint protection platforms, endpoint detection and response, they're cool terms. We like them. Users have no clue what we're talking about. So what we have found to be very effective, I mentioned our friends at Sprint, for instance. These guys have nailed this when it comes to the SMB market. You go to talk to somebody and you say, hey, you got antivirus on your laptop, don't you? And they're like, well, of course I do. Who wouldn't? You're like, yeah, but you're accessing all the same thing with your phone. Shouldn't you have antivirus on your phone? Well, yeah, I guess I should. All right, well, put on your bill. Okay, we're good, right? And BYOD, I encourage a lot of people to keep it simple. All the privacy concerns and everything that come from mobile threat or from MDMs and everything on mobile is because of that scary messaging that comes from Apple. Users don't think of antivirus as a privacy impacting solution. Matter of fact, users think of antivirus as something you're just supposed to have. So if the company is providing antivirus as a part, and they're saying, hey, look, in order to get access to Outlook, you need to install this antivirus product. Okay. I mean, so it's perfect, and it gets you 100% of the coverage. So very clever in terms of what they've done. So here we've got this little example, and the graphics in this particular thing are not completely up to date. The little video will show you a little bit more. But very first thing that happens, our console sitting on Azure, Intune, we sync with AAD. We've been doing that for the MDM side forever. Once we do that, when the user comes in, the first time, as I mentioned, it says you need to download this antivirus product. The user clicks on the link, goes and installs that. And then once, goes through the little activation process, when a threat is detected and the user tries to come in, all that forensic information, everything else, of course, go up to the network. The device level risk would be moved to high. We're assuming that that's the policy that somebody said, right? They said, okay, that's what we want it. Because at the same granular level of all the different threats we detect across device, network, phishing, and malicious apps, each one you can individually say, hey, if this one's happening, that's going to move the device level to medium in terms of risk, right? If it's high, then you can, for instance, say, okay, we're going to do remedial conditional launch. And there's, at the highest level, there's two major ways that you can do it. So now we've got this device, Zimperium has detected that it's under attack. It's at a compromised state. So the device level is set at high, the risk level is set at high. So when the user goes to access it, the two primary approaches, and again, now we're not dealing with this entire device, right? We're not going to wipe his device, and we're not going to, no, it's this person's trying to access Outlook and they're in a bad state. Outlook can block access and say, until you fix that problem, until you remove that malicious app, for instance, or get off that bad network, you don't get access to Outlook. Or they can even take it a step further and say, we're going to wipe all of the local Outlook data off your device if they think it's critical enough. They're going to say, we're just going to wipe all. So not only do you not get access, the stuff that was on your device, we're blowing it up right now so that even the bad guy can't see it, right? So that, and so by doing that, it actually enables you to tell the person, hey, you got to fix this, you got to clean it up. Once they clean it up, then they can actually come and access things. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute, and I'm going to pop over to a video to show you guys that same flow that I was just talking about. And so there's an example here. The person's going to come in, they're going to try and get access to Outlook, and then they're going to need to install the app. Once they install the app, then it actually scans. If it detects something, they get blocked until they remediate it, and then they go away. And then at the tail end of this, what I'm going to show you is an important screen, which is labeled GDPR. It's the forensic setting. And so giving you an advance to this whole thing, we are, as the enterprise guys, we believe you need to have very granular group-based policies. You should have a different set of policies for your BYOD users, for instance, than for your highly locked down corporate-owned devices. Those are, I mean, very high level, right? When it comes to the BYOD users, a lot of folks that are using us for BYOD start with a pre-canned, something we knew everybody was going to want, what's called the GDPR setting. And that GDPR setting is that balance of how much forensic data am I taking off without any PII being taken off. So it's just an example visual of a very quick way of being able to do it. Now for BYOD, you might say, I don't need to be quite as stringent as GDPR. Then you just change a few of them, you create a custom policy, and you're off to the races. But you have to, with BYOD, in order to actually succeed, it needs to be clean, it needs to be simple, the users need to see the value, and the privacy implications have to be taken care of. So it's about a minute long, and you'll see here, the person is going and accessing Outlook for the first time, and it basically says, okay, you need to install Zips. This is accelerated because we're doing a webinar, right? Let's say that Zips goes out and says, all right, we're all good right now. And so, now that, we're good based on the risk posture, you can go off and you can get your email and everything. But let's say that they were on a bad network. So if they're on a bad network, there's that active threat, they're being told, get off it, for instance. Then when they would try to actually access Outlook, they're blocked. They're saying you need to fix that. This is just a description of all the sort of forensic information that would be coming across from that particular rogue access point. So this would be what the admin would be able to see, or it could be dropped into ATP Defender. And then, as I was saying, here's that GDPR setting. So when we start looking at privacy and things on those lines, and then, as I mentioned, we can handle multiple UEMs in a single tenant. Since we handle multiple UEMs in a single tenant, then it enables us to either have Intune MAM and Intune MDM working together. It also could be where if you have a corporate owned, let's say AirWatch, Workspace ONE, but you were going BYOD for Intune, that you'd be able to do both there. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and then just stop and see if we have any questions. So with that, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about this, and I'm just going to wrap this up, and then we'll stop and look at the questions that we may have. So it is a really, really elegant, really cool way that Microsoft has gone about doing this, and we're really loving our partnership with them. I mean, we're all over the globe, literally working on BYOD initiatives with these guys right now. And it's that great balance of on-device detection, real-time, privacy-centric, along with the fact that you're getting access to all the right assets that people are looking for. And so it's a very, very elegant device. So let me see. I have a question here. What permissions does the Zips app need on private devices? I assume by private devices you mean BYOD, that it's actually owned by folks. And what happens if the user does not accept them or they're not permitted by the OS if not managed by an MDM? Okay, so first thing, from a permission standpoint, it's a public app. It's in the App Store, doesn't require any specific permissions. Now, there are things that we ask in terms of notifications and things on those lines that you want to be notified, for instance, if you're being attacked, for instance, but no specific permissions. If the user doesn't accept the app, as I was showing in the BYOD use case, then based on corporate policy, they wouldn't be able to get access to the resources that they're trying to get to. So that's the primary approach on that question. Let me see if I have any other, and if that question, if I didn't hit everything you want, feel free to shoot me an email, jt.keating@zimperium.com, and we can answer it more directly as well. So I do not see any other questions. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. And with that, I will give you the rest of your day back. Thank you again. Have a great day.